The Detroit Red Wings have a storied franchise, one that dates back almost 100 whole years. Originally joining the league for the 1926-27 season, it was only the 10th year in existence for the National Hockey League. While other leagues around the country were failing, the NHL was quickly growing in popularity. When the Motor City got their hockey team, they were a hot commodity with many suitors attempting to establish the organization. The team finally settled in and called themselves the Detroit Cougars. That name didn't last very long, however. For a brief 2-year period, they were known as the Detroit Falcons, but in 1932, they finally found their perfect team name, the Detroit Red Wings. By 1936, Detroit had already won their first Stanley Cup championship. The Wings established themselves as a heavyweight contender in the league while quickly adopting a winning culture, as they would go on to win back-to-back championships in 1936 and 1937. And over the next few decades, the Red Wings won even more Stanley Cups. They swept the Boston Bruins to win the 1943 Stanley Cup. The following season, they were lucky enough to land a young man named Gordie Howe. The undrafted sensation turned out to be one of the most well-rounded hockey players to ever play the game. Nicknamed Mr. Hockey, Gordie Howe led the league in points 6 separate times and had the most goals in the league 4 separate times. Under Gordie's leadership, the Red Wings would go on to win 4 more Stanley Cups, first in 1950, then again in 1952. In this era, the Red Wings made it to 4 Stanley Cups in a 6-year period when they won back-to-back championships again in 1954 and 1955. Now, it is totally worth mentioning there were only 6 teams in the entire league back then, so it's not the same kind of competition that players see in today's game. It wasn't until the 1967 season when the league would expand again. They doubled in size and went from 6 teams to 12. By 1974, the NHL expanded again, so they were up to 18 teams. Thankfully, the league just kept on expanding again in 1979 to 21 teams, and then in 1993, the NHL had grown all the way to 26 teams. Amazingly, the original 6 Detroit Red Wings, a team that was such a powerhouse throughout the 1950s, were never actually able to make it back into the winner's circle. The winning culture in Detroit had all but subsided. Although the passion and enthusiasm from fans around the city never once wavered, the product on ice was not living up to expectations. Thus, it was time to usher in a new era of hockey for Detroit. In 1983, Steve Yzerman was drafted to the team and immediately made an impact, with 39 goals and 48 assists for 87 points in his rookie campaign. The young stud took over as captain in 1986 and would put up amazing numbers year in and year out. Yzerman wasn't able to single-handedly turn around the success of the team, but he started to establish a winning identity for the Wings again. Steve Yzerman and the boys missed the playoffs that 1989 to 1990 season, but the front office made sure that that wouldn't happen again for a long time. In the 1989 draft, the Detroit Red Wings drafted Nicklas Lidstrom with the 53rd overall pick. 1 round later, they found another diamond in the rough named Sergei Fedorov, who would be picked 74th overall in the 4th round. Then in 1991, they found their future goaltender in Chris Osgood. He was the 54th overall pick and continued a streak of great draft picks from Detroit. The Red Wings now had the building blocks of their franchise. It didn't take long for the product on the ice to start producing better results. The 1991-92 season was a major step forward for the Red Wings, as they finished in first place with 43 wins for the season. Unfortunately, they ran into a strong Chicago Blackhawks team led by goaltender Ed Belfour, with star players Jeremy Roenick and Chris Chelios making Chicago a formidable team. The following season, they actually had more wins than their previous season with 47 wins. They finished in second place that season and in the playoffs lost a hard-fought battle to Doug Gilmour and the Toronto Maple Leafs. It came down to a Game 7 and it even came down to an overtime thriller, but the Leafs were able to get the win in the end. In the 93-94 season, the Red Wings had truly gained their identity as they finished the division in first place with a whopping 46 wins. They were hoping things would be a bit different this time around, but again, they went into a 7th and decisive game in the playoffs where they lost it to the 8th-seeded San Jose Sharks. This is still one of the most unlikely outcomes in Stanley Cup playoff history. It was just a complete shock to players and fans all around the country. That is what we love about professional hockey, though. The underdog can come through at any moment to upset the favorite. The next season was the 1994-95 lockout season. The season was shortened, but that didn't stop the powerhouse Red Wings from finishing with a record of 33 wins and 11 losses, making it all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals. The gritty team was led by defensemen Paul Coffey and Nicholas Lidstrom, but also guys like Keith Primo and Ray Shepard doing a bunch of the heavy lifting for the team on offense. Unfortunately, the Red Wings would run into a buzzsaw in the finals. A guy named Martin Brodeur, who ultimately dominated in net and took the New Jersey Devils to championship in 4 straight games. A huge-time bummer for the Motor City, who had been trying desperately to recapture the glory. The 1995-96 season was totally crazy as well. The Red Wings finished with a record 62 wins and 13 losses. And for a pretty long time, this was considered to be the greatest regular season in NHL history. However, the Boston Bruins recently in the past few years put an end to that in the 22-23 season, where they had an astounding 65 regular season wins. A pretty unfathomable statistic. Ironically, what both of these teams have in common is neither of them were able to turn that regular season success into a Stanley Cup victory. The Red Wings blew their chance in 6 games to a very savvy Colorado Avalanche squad, a team led by goaltender Patrick Roy and forwards Joe Sakic and Peter Forsberg. At this point, the Red Wing fans had been tormented for just too long. The team finished first in the division 4 times over the last 5 years with nothing to show for it. The Wings were determined to make things go differently this year and finally went on to win their 8th Stanley Cup championship. And to make it taste oh so sweeter, it was even a sweep, wiping the Philadelphia Flyers in 4 straight games. It may have been their 8th Stanley Cup win, but more importantly for the city of Detroit, it was their first championship win since 1955. A lengthy wait for any die-hard fan. The long wait in between Stanley Cups was well worth it in the end because they repeated the same recipe next season. They finished 2nd in the division, and wouldn't you know it, it led them back to the championships. Well done, Red Wings. The team was led by newly acquired Brendan Shanahan, defenseman Nicholas Lidstrom, and forward Steve Yzerman. The Winged Wheels swept the Washington Capitals for back-to-back Stanley Cup Finals sweeps. Head coach Scotty Bowman won his 2nd straight championship in Detroit, and it was his 8th in his career. The following season, the Wings finished in 1st place in their division again. This led the team to a semifinals loss against the Colorado Avalanche, a Colorado Avalanche team that was looking for revenge after getting knocked out in the playoffs only a few seasons ago. The Avalanche team made it twice as nice because in turn they knocked the Red Wings out of the playoffs not only that year but the following season as well. Detroit was still able to maintain their winning ways, however, even into the next decade. In 2002, Scotty Bowman led the Wings to their 10th Stanley Cup win, rostering possibly the greatest netminder in the world, Dominik Hasek, coupled with an incredible arsenal of veteran leaders. They had one of the best lineups just ever assembled in hockey ever. Yzerman, Shanahan, and Fedorov up front, and Chris Chelios and Nicholas Lidstrom on defense. Then they added Brett Hull, Luc Robitaille, and Pavel Datsyuk, making a truly out-of-this-world star-spangled roster. Scotty Bowman did a great masterful job in managing the Detroit Red Wings throughout the 1990s. Bowman took over in '93 and finished every season in either 1st or 2nd place in the division. He had already planned to retire from coaching following the 2002 season, and what a fitting way he was able to go out on top. A true champion who left the organization with a winning culture. The Red Wings even went on to win another Stanley Cup in the 2007-2008 season, further cementing that team name as the best hockey city in Northern America. So if you were a fan of the Red Wings back in the 90s or you just enjoy hockey these days, please do both of us a solid assist by subscribing to the channel if you haven't already, and give the video a thumbs up if you liked it. Thank you for watching, and happy hockey season, NHL fans!